Good afternoon. I'm Curtis Haymore. I'm president of the National Capital Area Skeptics, and this morning I'm proud to present Tony Van Pelt, who's going to talk about faith-based initiatives and charitable choice. But first, just a reminder to turn off your cell phones and so forth, and to thank J.D. Mack and his company Stage 2 AV Productions for providing the audio and visual for this event. I will dispense with the introduction. We'll have it on the web.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I guess here, I'll just do this. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to talk to you about the topic today because I think it's urgent that as many people, as many U.S. citizens as possible are aware of what is actually going on in our country. My big concern is the First Amendment, and is it really the law of the land, and how does that all work? So the topics that I have here: charitable choice, faith-based initiatives, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the Compassion Capital Fund, spiritual care, and the provider refusal regulation, which is really called the provider conscience regulation, but we like to call it the refusal. These are all issues that I think are urgent and primary. It's really important for all of us to understand. We will not have time to go through all of these today. Eventually, I guess I'll break it down into different talks. But I wanted to start to talk about the history of non-governmental organizations providing taxpayers benefits for social services. Originally, for a very, very long time, secular and religious organizations were providing these benefits for taxpayers. Some secular organizations that have been doing this in the past are CEDCO, which is an organization that actually goes into the local communities and trains local organizations on how to apply for government funding to provide for social services within their community. I list the Resource Center for Women. It was an organization that I was on the board of in Pinellas County in my home state of Florida for a long time, that accessed government funding to provide services for, when it first started out, they were called displaced homemakers, but for women that found themselves without a job and without a partner. Maybe they died or they were divorced, to help them establish a career again. The religious organizations that were originally involved were ones that you're probably familiar with: Catholic Charities, for instance, the Salvation Army, the Jewish Federation, just to name a few. Although the Salvation Army, since what's happened with the Bush administration, has moved from being as secular as it used to be to being more religious-based. The requirements for all were that they had to establish an IRS designation of a 501c3. They had to open up a separate checking account to keep the funds that they got from the government, and that they were not allowed to discriminate in hiring or in folks that volunteered or served in the programs. The additional requirements were that there would be no proselytizing allowed, no religious icons allowed in the rooms where the services were provided, and there actually were no problems. So I have this listed as charitable choice under 3 different presidents. So charitable choice was language that was meant to be inserted into social services bill, not as a standalone act or as a standalone bill originally. So it was brought about by John Ashcroft. Actually, it was the baby of John Ashcroft when he was then the senator, and it was a compromise. And I think I actually have these out of order, but the bill, the language was originally inserted into these 4 bills or acts: Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF, in 1996, which was a Clinton signature piece of doing away with welfare as we know it. Also, the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunities Reconciliation Act, which was the welfare to work grants that was done at exactly the same time in 1996. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Act, or SAMHSA, in 1998, and the Community Development Block Grants in 2000. So Ashcroft essentially created a solution that caused problems where there were none. So he insisted that there was discrimination against religious organization in the dissemination of federal funds. And his aim was to remove neutral safeguards and allowed for hiring and volunteering discrimination based on affiliation and beliefs. And it allows taxpayer dollars to be mingled with religious funds. So charitable choice in a nutshell does away with the safeguards. It does away, so now if you go in and, for instance, if it's a substance abuse, if it's something like the AA program, or any program like that, religions can now use their church to hold the meetings in. They can have religious icons on the walls. They can actually proselytize the way it's headed right now, and they can discriminate in who serves, who the staff is for the program. And so if you were Jewish and you were applying for the job and with Catholic Charities, they could deny you employment based on your religion because you were not Catholic. And it's not just what your religion may or may not be, but also whether or not you abide by the religious tenets. So, for instance, if you were a lesbian, if you were a beneficiary that was a lesbian, you could be denied services because the religious organization didn't agree with that situation. So as it marched along, it got even more egregious, and there have been rulings now that have come out of the Bush administration that allows for funding of religious activities, including paying for building additions. So there was actually a regulation that came out that said if you got these taxpayers' dollars to administer these programs and you use them to build an addition to the church or the mosque to provide the services, that when you stopped providing the services, then the building reverts back to the religious organization, and then they can use it in any way they want to. So we are now in a position of seeing taxpayers' dollars funding the building of churches and mosques and temples and so on. There is now also no protection for beneficiaries against religious bullying, including proselytizing and the displaying of the icons. And it's really detailed and hidden in the way that these things are done. I've put these into simpler, as simple a way as I can, but the way that the regulation is written for no protection for beneficiaries is that in some regulations it says that if a church or a religious organization is going to be holding this in a place or and the beneficiary objects to it, if they're savvy enough to object to it, then the organization, the religious organization, has to provide them with a secular alternative. But this is really difficult in rural communities where there's may not be a secular alternative, where they could be the only game in town, and there really is nowhere else for these folks to go. And in the old days, the way that the programs were administered, they had to hire an executive director and staff members that had experience in the program, had some knowledge, had some education in the program. They no longer have to do that. The only requirement for being hired these days, if the organization chooses, is that you're of the right religious affiliation. And what they can do is not hire somebody from the outside, an executive director or staff member, and use the taxpayers' dollars to pay them. But what they can do now is use somebody that they've hired with religious funds, that they pay with religious funds, and have them administer the program. And therefore, they don't have to follow the rules and regulations because they're not being paid for with the taxpayers' dollars.